Um, Usually when we think about survival in like a post-apocalyptic wasteland, we picture concrete bunkers and high walls.
Right, yeah, like a fortress.
Exactly. You lock the heavy steel door, you block out the mutated monsters, and the survivor inside breathes a sigh of relief, like they are safe.
Well, the threat in that scenario is entirely external. I mean, as long as the physical architecture holds, you endure. It's a very tangible, easily measurable kind of safety.
But consider what happens when you step into a world where the fortress walls didn't fail, but the survivor's mind did.
Oh, yeah, that is entirely different.
Right. A situation where the sanctuary they built to survive wasn't made of steel or concrete, but of 12 years of pure, desperate hallucination.
It's just so dark.
It really is. So today's deep dive is for those of you who want to look past the surface level action of a story and, well, dissect the actual psychological architecture of survival. We are unpacking excerpts from the post-apocalyptic sci-fi fantasy novel San Vitae, The Awakening by D.P. Kirk. Specifically, we're providing a curated reader's guide to chapter 14, which is titled Dawn.
And for anyone familiar with the genre, dawn acts as a structural fulcrum for the entire novel.
Yeah, it really shifts everything.
It does. It is the moment where the external world building we've seen so far crashes violently into the internal trauma of the protagonist.
Okay, let's unpack this because to understand why this chapter completely recontextualizes the story, we first need to look at the actual mechanics of the world Kirk has built.
Right, exactly. And why survival here comes with such a grotesque price tag.
Right. So the world of San Vitae is not just a standard fantasy setting that experienced like a bad war. It was ravaged by an apocalyptic event they call the cataclysm.
Literal scar in the heavens.
Yeah, it tore open, dropping cauldrons of fire and fundamentally altering the physical and biological makeup of the planet.
Which is such a cool concept.
Yeah, it is. Now, the remnants of humanity are violently divided into ideological factions, and Kirk gives each of them a terrifyingly logical foundation for their brutality.
Like the pureblood zealots, the Humanis La Luna, they are a perfect example of that logical foundation.
Oh, they are terrifying.
Right. Because in traditional fantasy, a zealot faction is often presented as generically evil. But here, they're reacting to a literal apocalypse.
Yeah, they have a reason.
From their perspective, the cataclysm wasn't a natural disaster, it was magical fallout.
Wow, so they view it like radiation.
Exactly. They view the world's magic system, which is fueled by a life force called Vitae, as the radioactive element that broke the planet.
That makes so much sense.
So their crusade to cleanse the world of anyone tainted by magic is driven by this twisted environmental imperative. They believe they are sterilizing a diseased Earth.
Which creates an incredibly hostile environment for anyone who utilizes that magic. And the magic itself is relentlessly biological.
That's not pretty.
No, it's not. We aren't talking about wizards reciting incantations from spellbooks. Vitae manifests in visceral, bodily ways. You have Sanites, the powerful variants of the magic users, undergoing terrifying feral transformations.
Oh, the body horror is real.
Yeah, we are talking about rapid shifts in bone density, elongated claws, and a massive expenditure of caloric and biological energy.
And that biological magic operates alongside highly advanced sci-fi concepts.
Yeah.
Like if we connect this to the bigger picture, the world features organizations like TASC.
Right, the Tactical Alternate Space Command.
Yes, they take the raw energy of Vitae and apply theoretical physics to it. So instead of just casting a projectile spell, TASC operatives manipulate alternate space geometry.
Which blew my mind when I read it.
It's brilliant. They can physically fold the dimensions of a room so that a bullet travels 2 inches instead of 200 yards.
That is just wow.
It is a dense, highly lethal ecosystem where every use of power requires a profound understanding of physical laws and, a heavy biological toll.
So if you think of this world like a highly lethal game of chess where half the pieces are actively mutating, our protagonist, Kurien, sits right in the crosshairs of all this lethal complexity.
He really does. He can't catch a break.
No, he can't. He is a Sanite, specifically a former conscript to a powerful Covenness named Myasuchi within the Santerrie faction.
And the Santerrie are a covenant-based society built heavily around protection, sacrifice, and deep bonds of servitude.
Right. So when we enter chapter 14, Kurien has just pulled off a seemingly impossible escape from an Inquisitor's underground torture vault alongside another escaped Sanite, Sharina.
But the physical escape is merely the prologue to the actual conflict.
Yeah.
They are hiding in the crumbling, storm-battered ruins of Kurien's old city, Rowanth. and they're being hunted by New Covenant soldiers, anti-sand drones, and the Humanis La Luna.
The environment outside is actively hostile. It's just battered by lightning and relentless rain.
Exactly. But for someone who has endured what Kurien has in that vault, the absence of immediate physical torture doesn't magically equate to safety.
Right, which raises a huge question. Given the constant threat of violence they just escaped, how does Kurien's mindset affect his ability to even process safety?
Well, his psyche is severely fractured. Trauma doesn't evaporate just because the environment changes. It creates a vacuum.
And the narrative brilliance of Dawn is how it isolates that vacuum. Like, Kirk hits the brakes on the explosive action.
It's so quiet.
It is. We leave the drones and the zealots outside in the storm, and the narrative pushes inward into this claustrophobic, abandoned room.
Just two deeply traumatized people essentially holding their breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop.
And it does drop, but through an agonizingly small, intimate accident.
Yes. Shrina is sitting there, picking at her fingernails and tracing the fabric of her pant leg, just trying to ground herself.
Yeah, a grounding technique.
And in the process, she accidentally slices her finger on a silver-colored dagger blade. It is a mundane injury, especially compared to the horrors they just escaped.
Right, so Kurien immediately steps in to help. He intends to just daub a tiny bit of his vitae into a bowl of herbs to create a basic healing poultice.
A simple first aid moment.
Exactly. But the moment he pricks his own finger, the situation spirals entirely out of his control. Instead of a controlled release, his dark vitae autonomously flows across the physical space between them.
It bypasses the herbs entirely.
It does. It enters directly into Shrina's wound.
The cultural context makes this terrifying, because in Santerrie society, blood bonding is the ultimate form of connection.
Right. It's supposed to be intentional.
Very intentional. It requires an unwavering, highly conscious commitment from both donors. It is a profound tethering of two souls and bodies.
So to have that happen involuntarily.
It is an absolute subversion of everything Kurien understands about his own biology and culture.
Okay, I have to push back on this autonomous healing mechanism, though.
Oh, interesting. What?
Well, if his magic, his literal biological life force, overrides his conscious will so completely that he tries to pull his hand away but physically cannot, isn't the magic essentially victimizing him again?
Ah, I see what you mean.
I mean, he just escaped an Inquisitor's torture vault where his physical autonomy was entirely stripped away. Now his own biology is taking away his consent. It feels less like a profound bond and more like a massive violation.
And the terror of that violation is exactly what makes the magic system so compelling, because you are entirely correct. It strips his autonomy.
Right.
But we have to look at the why. Vitae is not a tool. It is deeply tied to the nervous system.
Okay.
Think about the human sympathetic nervous system. You cannot actively consent to your white blood cells attacking a virus, or to your adrenal glands flooding your body when a car swerves into your lane.
That's a great point. It just happens.
Your biological immune system takes over to keep you alive. Kurien's vitae is acting like an emotional and physical immune system that has gone into absolute overdrive.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's like a rogue autopilot system.
Yes. His conscious mind is too traumatized to steer, so his biological imperative to survive and to keep another Sanite alive takes the wheel.
Forcing an emotional tether between two broken survivors. And the biological mechanism of that healing is staggering to witness.
It really is.
It isn't just a glowing light that magically closes a cut. The vitae facilitates hyper-accelerated cellular synthesis.
Shrina's body is severely malnourished and atrophic from her time in the vault.
But the influx of Kurien's surplus life force causes her muscle mass to rebuild instantly. Like, her tangled, dull hair violently regains a dark, healthy sheen.
The magic acts as a frantic cellular response to death.
Yeah.
It forces a euphoric rush of connection between them. The sheer volume of shared life force temporarily overwhelms their defenses.
Which highlights a crucial theme, right?
Exactly. Their power is intrinsically tied to their profound loneliness. The magic acts on the absolute truth of his subconscious need for connection, entirely ignoring the hesitation and trauma of his conscious mind.
Which sets up the psychological trap of the chapter.
Oh, the trap is brutal.
It is.
Yeah.
Because that profound physical healing and that euphoric rush of connection actually do the worst thing possible for Kurien in that moment. They make him relax.
Yeah, he lets his guard down.
The bond strips away the hypervigilance he needs to protect his own fractured mind.
Physical restoration clears the way for psychological devastation.
Man.
They're sitting together in the quiet aftermath of the bonding, the storm raging outside, and they begin sharing the intimate details of their pasts, building a fragile trust.
So Sharina reveals the deeply tragic backstory behind the tattoos on her side.
Those tattoos are amazing.
She has these intricate, glowing lavender flowers inked onto her skin. She explains that each flower represents a member of her fallen Sanite clan, and the mechanics of the tattoos are tied to the clan's life force. They were once a vibrant, luminous lavender, but they lost their color and went dark as, one by one, her family was wiped out.
It is a phenomenal piece of world building. She literally carries the graveyard of her family on her skin.
Wow.
The fading of the ink is a biological death certificate.
Moved by the raw vulnerability of her story, Kurien opens up about his own life. He speaks with deep reverence about his beloved Myasuchi, the powerful Covenness he served.
He describes the commanding aura she possessed, the depth of his devotion to her.
He casually talks about his life with her, mentioning their son Han. He posits a theory that Rolante, the ruined city they are currently taking shelter in, must have fallen sometime after he and Myasuchi were captured.
The reader is following along, entirely invested in this tragic but grounded backstory.
Right, you think you're just getting exposition.
And then Sharina delivers a line that completely shatters the foundation of the novel.
She looks at him with this heavy, solemn expression. She doesn't comfort him. She flatly states that Rolante was wiped out at least a decade ago. It was one of the very first cities destroyed in the faction struggles.
Kurien's immediate reaction is to correct her math.
Right, he thinks she's just wrong.
He remembers the timeline with perfect clarity. He says, 12 years.
And the moment he speaks those words, the horrifying reality crashes down.
It's devastating.
If the city fell a decade ago, and he has been gone for 12 years, the math is impossible. The realization hits him. The last 12 years of his life, the desperate escape in a carriage with Myasuchi, settling down in a hidden sanctuary, witnessing the birth of his son Han, raising a child.
None of it ever happened.
It was a complete hallucination. A sanctuary constructed by his fractured mind to survive.
To understand how a mind could fabricate an entire deco of memories, we have to look at the mechanics of the torture he endured.
The Inquisitor's vault.
Yes. It's not just a dark dungeon. Kurien was strapped inside a mechanized Iron Maiden.
Ugh.
This implies a systemic, calculated application of pain explicitly designed to outpace a Sanite's extraordinary healing factor.
So it's constantly hurting him.
The machine inflicts catastrophic damage, the VT frantically heals the tissue, and the machine immediately inflicts it again. It is a perpetual motion machine of agony.
Oh, wow. If a human brain is subjected to a dozen years of constant physical destruction and forced regeneration, it cannot remain conscious in that reality and survive.
It simply can't.
The brain builds a firewall. Kurien's subconscious constructed an incredibly dense, sensory-rich hallucination to block out the Iron Maiden.
He had to forge the smell of his fictional son's hair, the exact tone of Myasuchi's voice, the feeling of safety.
The hallucination wasn't a fleeting dream, it was the structural, load-bearing pillar of his sanity.
What's fascinating here is D.P. Kirk's execution of this reveal. It is masterful because it completely upends the tired, it was all a dream trope.
Oh, absolutely.
In lesser hands, that trope is a cheap trick to undo plot consequences. Here, the hallucination is the inciting incident for the true emotional horror of the story.
And Kurien's reaction to the truth is what grounds this high fantasy concept in raw, ugly realism. He doesn't just fall to his knees and scream at the sky like a standard tragic hero.
No, his body physically rejects the paradox.
The realization literally induces illness. He rushes to the window of the abandoned building and vomits violently into the storm.
The mind finally communicates the trauma to the body, and the body violently purges it. It is a visceral, deeply unglamorous reaction to unimaginable grief.
It is exactly like waking up from the most beautiful, comforting dream of your entire life, only to realize you've been breathing in thick, toxic smoke the whole time.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to put it.
Your lungs are burning, the room is on fire, and the warmth and safety you felt were just neurological symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning.
Exactly.
The life he cherished, the son he loved, poof, evaporated into the smoke. And Sharina, to her credit, doesn't try to coddle him or offer false hope.
She can't. She has survived the vault, too.
She just sits with him in the ashes of his reality.
So this raises an important question about the genre itself. We can extract a profound takeaway from this chapter about the nature of trauma and resilience.
Yeah, how does sci-fi and fantasy usually handle trauma?
Well, this sequence vehemently refuses to gloss over the mental toll of surviving an apocalypse. The broader genre often features heroes who endure unspeakable physical and mental agony only to wake up, shake it off, grab their weapon, and go save the world.
Right, the invincible hero.
But San Vitae, the awakening demands that we acknowledge the psychological bill that comes due. Kurien's immense sanity power does absolutely nothing to protect his mind.
If anything, it makes it worse.
In fact, his power actively complicates his trauma by forcing him into biological bonds when he desperately wants to be numb.
So what does this all mean for the book as a whole? I mean, it demands vulnerability in a world that explicitly punishes it.
Definitely.
For those of you who dive deep into lore, this is why Chapter 14 acts as the ultimate proof of concept for the entire novel.
It's a masterclass in pacing.
It is. You come for the intricate magic system, the feral transformations, the blood bonding, the TASC, alternate space geometry, but you stay because the emotional stakes are unapologetically raw.
The cost of survival here is never just physical exhaustion. The cost is the erosion of reality itself.
Which is just so compelling.
The chapter forces you to reevaluate every interaction, every slip of memory Kurien had up to this point. It rewards careful reading. It proves that the author isn't just moving chess pieces around a board, they're dissecting the pieces themselves.
Chapter 14, Dawn, is the harrowing, brilliantly written turning point, where the protagonist's beautiful fantasy violently dies so that his actual ugly survival can finally begin.
Yes.
If you are a reader who craves stories that blend heavy, logical sci-fi mechanics with undeniable psychological depth, you are perfectly primed to tackle D.P. Kirk's universe.
The architecture of the world only gets more complex as the internal architecture of the characters crumbles.
I love that. So I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you explore the source material on your own.
Okay.
Throughout the text, there are scattered references to the demon aspect within the Sanites.
Right, the dark side of the Vitae.
The narrative generally paints this demon as a dark, violent force of malice and pure bloodlust that takes over when a Sanite is pushed past their breaking point.
A monstrous alter ego born of Vitae.
But consider the mechanics of the Inquisitor's Vault again. If the conscious mind of Kurien was safely tucked away in a 12-year hallucination of quiet life with his son, what entity was actually piloting his physical body inside the Iron Maiden?
Oh, wow.
If that dark demon aspect was the thing that actively stepped in to absorb a decade of unending, agonizing physical torture just to keep Kurien's fragile human mind from snapping entirely.
That changes everything.
Is the demon actually a parasite? Or, in a twisted, horrific way, is that dark, violent entity the absolute purest, most compassionate manifestation of the human survival instinct?
It completely reframes what it means to carry a monster inside you.
We build fortresses to keep the monsters out, but sometimes you have to let the monster take the wheel to survive the fire. Keep seeking out the stories that challenge your perspective, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.